When it comes to EVE Online, every player wants to know the most effective tactic available. You want to know the meta. The meta controls everything. It determines what will and will not happen. Knowing the meta will alter your views, make you question your reality. It might even make you laugh. And now, you're part of it. You're watching The Meta Show.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending this week's episode of The Meta Show. We have an exciting show today. I've got Dave Archer with me, my host, co-host, I'm co-host, whatever we want to call us. We are the dual host of The Meta Show right now. And joining us, we have some fantastic guests from across Nullsec. Some of these names you may know. Some of these names you may not be too fond of because they blew up your spaceship, your super, your capital, whatever it may be. But they're pretty cool people. We've gotten an opportunity to get to know them over the last couple of weeks as we've chatted. But we're going to get into some of the stuff we've talked about, like the Legion update and some reactions there, and talk to our guests and see what their thoughts about EVE are. But before we get into that, we've got some fun stuff we always need to talk about for this show. The Meta Show is doing a rotating host schedule for Season 6 run of the show. We'll have a survey at the end. Just let us know how we are doing. And as always, as I say week over week, variety content is changing. Let us know what you'd like to see on the channel. We're reviewing content now, and we want to deliver the things that you, our viewers, want to see. And lastly, but not least, the team is recruiting stream producers, EVE streamers, and variety streamers. Please be sure to reach out to someone from INN and let us know what's up. Before I get into our story today, everybody, I'm going to give our viewers kind of an idea, like quick rundown of who do we have here today. Okay, I know there's been a Reddit post about some of our guests. We've got a couple guests who won't be joining us. They've had some real life conflicts, unfortunately. And as we all know, RL takes priority, right? But who do I have here today? Alistair, I'm going to start with you, my friend. Tell our guests who you are today. Tell our audience.
As opposed to
Hello,
yesterday.
my name is Alistair Sharp. I am the only FC in Only Fleets. And do you want a fun fact about me? I currently own a Procurer with a Revenant kill mark.
There you go. And he was, I want everybody to know real quick, I'm going to put him on the spot real quick. He was really stressing over that fun fact, so I'm glad we were able to get that out of Alistair here. Thank you, sir. BJK, you're next, sir.
Cheers. Hi, BJK here of Decoy. I've flown around for many years. Been in TNT, Triumvirate, Pandemic Family, Fraternity. Now had our own alliance, joining Curse for a while. And now we're fond members of Phoenix Coalition. And my fun fact, I have a 3D model of a harpy that someone printed out for me at a court meeting for Do It over in Italy. That's still one of my prized possessions. Sits on my shelf. No kill
That's
marks
awesome.
on it though.
You can't go wrong with a harpy. Great assault frigate, and I know goons love to fly him. So, all right, next on my list, Garst. Let our viewers know who you are, sir.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for letting me come on and talk today. So my name is Garth Serrell. I'm the Alliance leader and one of the FCs for Triumvirate Alliance. Been playing since about 2009, and majority of that time has been FCing mostly in nullsec and smaller, medium-sized groups. Fun facts, I don't really believe in fun or objectives truth, but I did think of one just right now, and I remember years ago I had somehow had a secret admirer send me a Garst painting with a chimera in the background, which was pretty cool, and that also made me really question my OPSEC in terms of what kind of information I was putting out there. So hopefully no more secret admirers at the moment, but I do at least have that framed picture in my office.
That's awesome. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, a secret admirer. As long as they say a secret, I guess, and they don't follow you too much around. All right, and last but not least, Rots. Tell us about you.
That's a hard one to follow up. I want a painting with a chimera.
It is.
I'm Rots Mineworker. I'm the Alliance exec for Out of the Blue Vapor. Also happy to say I'm one of the only FCs there, or I am one of some now. I should be happy about that. Fun fact, I was told by my wife like 5 minutes ago I am a snack after she asked me how it felt when I fell out of the vending machine.
That's a good pickup line. And we here at the Meta Show support our significant others flirting with us while we're on the show. That's always fun, right? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. I know I put you on the spot there, but definitely lets our viewers know we're not showing feet chat. I'm sorry. There will be no feet pics on the show, maybe for the after show. But let's get into our main story here. Dave. And as always, I can never say this right. It's the top story, not the main story, not the main topic, whatever. I always mess this up, this transition up. One day I will get it right, everybody. But let's go ahead and get into it. Why are we here today? As you saw a couple weeks ago, we did have a chat with some of our low sec counterparts on what can we do to reduce stagnation. There's a lot of stuff that we talked about. We talked about the stagnation in the game. We talked about structure defense. We talked about potentially reversing surgical strike. We talked about logi buffs. And I said it last week when we talked over kind of our reactions to the Legion update announcement and that kind of thing. But those were all topics that we discussed and then ended up getting implemented here by CCP. And our team here and our group that we've got, our roundtable that we have here, has got some unique insight. And what I want to kind of talk about first, and I'm going to open up the floor to everybody here, so feel free to kind of chime in as you want. What are our reactions to the Legion update? Do we feel the Legion update is going in the right direction? And whoever wants to take us away, take us away.
Well, I'll go for it first. 100%. The Legion update is absolutely going in the right direction. I think the surgical strike revert, especially on the resistances, is very, very good for wanting to outplay people. Logi buffs, subcap logi buffs are great. I now don't just have to drop endless amounts of faxes, which mid-scale alliances do not have, to be able to just win a fight. So that is very, very nice. And yeah, they're the two big things that I like out of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So a big thing about the surgical strike implementation is that the idea was it would make it a lot easier to destroy ships. So things have been removed from the game, which is great all around. But what it meant on the lower side, so let's say you got 20, 30, 40 pilots in fleet, well, the majority of pilots switched into volley compositions. So when Decoy was setting up down in Curse, our main doctrines were either Cinnables or Macarials, because you'd either win the fight in the first 60 seconds because you could volley something, or you simply couldn't. And there was no real wiggle room to play with resist profiles. You wouldn't really drop facts on anything. You wouldn't really try and hold grid on a gate, because it just wasn't the meta for trying to grow in that scale of things. So seeing that, seeing these resist profile changes is hopefully going to open that a little bit more now.
I'll just
Do we
jump in
feel
for-
like?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Garth. Nope, go ahead, man.
No, I was just play devil's advocate for a second. So I kind of have mixed feelings about this. Obviously, EHP changes affect everybody, not just the little guy. So, with all fleets on grid getting the same buff, N+1 is still a thing. If you still have 10 Logi, they have still 10 Logi, but they also have 100 extra people with them. I think there is still a limit on how much skill can do. At the end of the day, numbers still tell for a lot.
Yeah, that was going to be kind of my call out. Is I feel like as of lately, a lot of fights are decided in like the first 30 seconds once you land on grid. You play it out and you're like, I lost my logi, I lost a couple boats. I'm either going to win this or I'm out, right? And I'm curious if these surgical strike updates, the thoughts here of this group, does it allow, and that you kind of segued into that there, Garst, does this allow for a little more skill-based FCing as far as that content, being able to stay on grid, hey, you're going to hold most of the time in the first 30 seconds, you're not going to just lose boats to some alpha doctrine or whatever that's out there? Or does this kind of like, hey, to your point, you're like, well, we still have the N+1, so I don't know if this really solves anything.
Well, I have two thoughts on that. So the first one is that the game's been going a long time. So people have money now. Implants are a lot more common. Most people have dread alts. So the average skill level is higher. So is the ISK involved in the game. So the ability to outplay groups like little elite, some performance group is a lot higher bar to try and reach that level. And the second thing is that I don't know if a little bit more EHP is really going to drastically change the situation on grid. Generally, if you're being alpha, they have a lot more than just one or two ships, and it's not going to quickly reach that threshold where they're no longer alphaing you. I mean, of course, that's possible, but in general, it's usually lopsided, I think, is the overall issue.
Yeah, yeah. And you talked about capitals, and part of this update, and I know we did the reversal of surgical strike and that kind of thing. We're going to make things tankier. We also buffed supers, right? So we saw an increase to the HP of supers. We saw an increase in the single target DD of Titans. What kind of impact do we think that has for the groups that you gentlemen are coming from in the gameplay? And is that a move in the right direction as well?
If they were going to use supers and titans in fights, they'd be doing it already.
Yeah,
Okay.
in terms of the mid-scale alliances, it doesn't change a thing.
Yeah, kind of like at the price point that we'd be dropping a super to maybe break a fact instead of like a Zenitra or something else. It just doesn't really make much sense to have that pilot parked for so long, just in case these situations come up. That has never kind of been on our radar for nearly 2 years living in the Scalding Pass or Curse. It just didn't feel like a viable option to even use those then. And I don't think having like a number going up a bit more is gonna really help that. It was never a case of, oh wow, nice. This would have lived if it had so many million more EHP. It's like no, it's either on fire or it's not.
Yeah, I think
agree.
if you reduce the cost, you might have my eyebrow raised, but I don't know. I don't think changing these stats does anything.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, the people that are going to try and kill it, all they have to do is just bring more dreads, for instance. You know, you can increase the resist, but then the people attacking you are just going to bring more of whatever they're using to kill you.
Well, that's also what I was kind of hinting at earlier too. So not only are dreads more common in the game now as people have HP and stuff like that, but then of course you have the Zenitra issue and you have, the different buffs they've had for dreads over the years. I agree with the panel. I don't think the EHP is going to change the use case. I think it'll have potentially big impacts for quote unquote super capital fights because those happen so often for the blocks, but not for small groups.
And then to chime in on what Garth said, because I'm also not like surgical strike being reverted was great. Like, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's going to keep anyone from dropping effects on your T2 Logi. I don't think it's, at least for groups our size, I think you're still going to see the same use cases, at least right now.
So would you say they went in the right direction but didn't go far enough?
I think you have small changes. Like I ran for CSM. I acknowledge that you're not going to come in and you're going to make global changes, one single change to fix the game. I think this is a good step. I think there are other steps you can or should take to maybe dial it back into where you want it to be. I mean, it's nice to have a goal right now, which is a lot to say for CCP at the moment. I think that's great.
The one thing the one thing I would not want CCP to do is to go too far. I would rather, because
Agreed.
they have just such an experience with just taking things way too far when something's not working. So I think the little changes, little and often, are infinitely better.
What do we think? So we talked about capitals, right? And we talked about how we're using when we said supers, we said, hey, like you guys were like, hey, I don't think we use them. And I think Rots, you hinted at if we saw the price go down, it might raise your eyebrow. What do you think it would take to see you guys use capitals more?
I mean, I use them. I also self-admittedly, I'm an FC who's never liked FCing caps. It's not been my bread and butter. It's not where I enjoy the game the most. I'll use them when I want to. We've merged. We've had GWCS AMC dudes merged with us. We are actively dropping our nano supers, or even today they were DDing something with an Erebus. That's probably the most super cap use I've seen in out of the blue in a hot minute. We'll use them occasionally when I know 100% I can just tilt the fight and then drop it out or get it out. I I don't think it's going to affect me much because someone actually just mentioned is like how many keep stars can you drop and how many tunes can you coffin. I mean, it all adds up for a mid-scale group. Um, I don't mind parking things having alts. It's just I've never been in a specific time in a fight where I've been like, I'm just going to drop these supers right in this moment against PL. And that's who I'm fighting. I'm fighting Horde. I'm fighting goons. I'm fighting people immediately around us. There's a few of us in the general area that enjoy that same amount of being butt up with those larger groups. It's just not in our play style at the moment.
Yeah,
There's
no,
kind
and
of
that's.
two.
Go ahead.
Sorry, so I said there's kind of two use cases at the moment for a super. The first one is you've got a ton of EHP, you're sat on grid with fighters out, you're guarding a gate, you're trying to prevent anything coming through, or maybe you're sat on grid still on a gate on a structure with fighters going towards the Fortizar. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is you warp in 10 seconds and have a cloak fitted, and there's no real in between scenario. If there was something that would incentivize you to have it on grid for something other than just to make a bunch of fighters that have the same EHP as a cruiser move somewhere, then maybe.
And BJK is spot on with that, and something I'm thinking about too. So I think there's a perspective that supers need to be on grid. It's desirable, it's aspirational for people to want to play the game. Titans are a big ship. You want to train up into it. That's the dream, right? But any experienced FC knows a capital is a tool and you use the right tool for the situation. So if you want to incentivize capital use, you have to create situations where that's the best tool for the job. And there's just been so many changes over the game, especially with citadels replacing bosses and the old NPC stations, that supers just aren't really ever the right tool for the job anymore, unless you can basically guarantee a win, or like he said, you're just nanoscale PvPing.
We talked about this a little bit, and we're going to stay a little bit on supers here for a second, though, because I'd like to hear your opinions. The groups here that we have represented here, what I do see you guys do is you do some whaling, right? Like I think everybody here has done a little bit of that, that kind of thing. Do you think this update does motivate some of those? We talked about goons, our alliance, that kind of thing, and we talked about horde and PanFam and that kind of stuff. Do we think we see more of those out and see whaling kind of be more? I know Ratsu talked about AMC; those guys are crazy. So I'm just curious your thoughts on: do we see them used more in that kind of PVE setting to allow kind of those more organic fights happen? We talked about this a little bit on the last one, where hey, I want to see more objectives in space and the kind of that stuff happening. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
For my end, when I talk about the AMC dudes and Vapor as a whole, we're currently staged in Great Wildlands, so we're catching them transiting.
Yeah.
I may catch them ratting here and there. I probably land on more supers roaming than I could count, but they're all in crab beacons. What we've just done with these changes, we've said I need more kikis, and I need to find a way to sit on grid long enough without them dropping faxes. You've bought them more time. Um, Whereas, like, if it were me, I would say, hi, I still want them to be just as vulnerable as they were. I think I've seen a lot more whaling recently. That's been really great to watch. The number of dead Rorks is wonderful in Impasse. No offense to you two. But the reality of that is now you've just bought more time. Whereas I would have liked to see the cost reduced. I want more on grid. That's normally the formula I go for. I want more people in supers so I have more opportunities to catch them, and I want to be able to have the chance to kill them. I think you've given them 15% more chance to stay on grid.
With the resist buff though,
ahead, Dave.
do you reckon we'll see the return of a lot more using dreads to kill supers that are just crabbing, rather than just spam kikis at it? Go back to the old dread bomber super and get out.
If you're, I don't think I'm the group to ask that. I think if you're looking at snuff, anyone who's I'll be real. If you're traditionally looking at someone who's able to put together 100 dreads and bomb, yeah, sure, like that. I think that'll be great. I don't think it's incentivized. They'd be doing it right now already. I haven't seen that many of late. Snuff is the only one having, dropped a 100 plus on Frat recently, and that was 4 months ago, 5 months ago. I might be wrong. I haven't seen a lot of the battle reports, but I'm not seeing large dread bombs right now.
I think the answer to that is still no. Dreads are still too expensive to make them efficient. When you're trying to drop into what would effectively be a super umbrella, right? Like if you drop on a super outside of an umbrella, you don't generally need dreads. You can just kill them, unless they are near to a super umbrella. But you would still have to drop a lot of dreads to kill a super that was actually under a super umbrella. The changes haven't really made that much of a difference. Yeah, you get a little bit more time to save it, but is that really that much of a difference? Do you get that much longer to save it? Probably not. Like, so it probably hasn't made a difference at all.
I keep
Yeah.
thinking back to supers when they used to be called motherships, and they've gone through these different changes, and over the time they've added like the doomsday weapons on them and the super clap or super cap recloning bay and things like that to try and give them a unique role. I think the supers in general are a catch-22 from a game design perspective, because you either make them cheap enough that they become the optimal gameplay and using anything other than a super is dumb, or they're kind of what they are now where they're so expensive that there's not a use case that justifies the amount of risk that you have to use to put that super if it basically just does what a dread is going to do much cheaper. And I think unless they can, reconcile that gameplay design fundamental issue, I just don't really see a place for the supers being predominant in the meta again. And I think a big reason for that is, we were talking in the chat before this, a few of the things that we used to do with them back in the day was encapsulation mods, hot drop on jump bridge modules, hot drop jump freighters using pauses. Those gameplays don't exist anymore because other systems have changed around it, and supers kind of just exist.
Yeah, and you talk about other systems, and what I want to go into, I think I'm going to summarize real quick. Legion is a step in the right direction. The super changes, kind of in the middle ground on where it's like I don't think it'll really. You guys are like, hey, I don't think I'll bring more supers out, that kind of thing. But one of the things we haven't touched on, we talked about the EHP increase of supers, and it's like, hey, will they be used more, that kind of stuff. But there's another factor that factors in when we talk about supers ratting, are the soft changes, right? So the additional EHP that they're going to get from those additional soft changes. And I bet you if somebody's ratting in a super, they're going to rat in a super in that system that has that additional EHP. What are your thoughts on that soft change?
It will be, for mid-scale alliances, one of the worst changes they have brought into the game in terms of stagnation itself.
Ditto.
It will make it so much easier as a defender to fuck an attacker's day. Right? Like, and I've used this in comms with our guys. It's okay, my fort gets refed by X people. There's probably a certain amount of like, yeah, if you have way more numbers than me, it's going to die anyway. But if you are a comparable alliance, I wait for you to commit. I wait to see what you commit. I turn on the opposite weather, undock the right comp, and I instantly have a massive advantage. That is the worst implementation of a new system that there could be. They just need to add some kind of delay so that there's counterplay. The biggest issue with it is there is no counterplay right now. You can just turn it on once you've committed and the attackers are screwed. It needs to be some kind of timer, at least with things like inhibs, with the jammers, sorry. There's a timer. You can see, okay, there's a jammer coming online in 45 minutes. I know that. It needs to be, it either turns on a downtime or there is a spool up time. It cannot be instant. If it's instant, this game will get even more stagnant.
Maybe
I mean,
answer,
totally in agreement there.
maybe the answer is to make it a flex structure. So just like a jammer, if you want to get a jammer online, you would do it right before the timer, so you don't have to be babysitting the damn thing all day.
The key point is counterplay.
I feel like it's a solution looking for a problem. I don't know if anyone ever said, "Oh my God, I can't fight these people because we're missing 10% EHP from a system bonus."
Oh,
That, oh,
gee, I
by the
wish there
way,
was a
stacks with
storm.
everything else. I think if they're going to do that, like if they really committed to it, they should lean into doing something fun with it, like changing the rules of the game for that system, like raising the cap of how many people you can boosh or remove, something like that changes fundamentally the tactics you can use in that system instead of just an EHP change, which is pretty boring, to be honest.
Yeah, like the scan res warp speed ones, cool. They're a fun little addition. They can help you with the jump bridge networks. Like you can camp gates a bit better in certain systems. Doesn't massively affect the stagnation in the game, but the flat EHP ones are just awful, and the current implementation, if it comes in, will be bad for this game.
I mean that, and if you
Well,
can
another-
stack them with Sinojam, it just from a defender's capacity right now, I think a lot of we'll probably talk about it later, is the problem with citadels right now, and the problem with stagnation in a lot of cases is that it's defenders' advantage, and you've just handed them a huge advantage.
Well,
and then on top of that, like I can speak to, like I had some small scale groups that hit me up, and they were like, "Hey, this D-scan change plus the changes to needle jacks and conduits is huge. It's a huge problem." They're like, now you've just said, hey, you can D-scan out further now and find me while I'm waiting to needle jack out. It's just,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
don't
I'm
know.
really happy that they've made those changes to filaments. Like to know that you could just go into someone's space, and then when your board leaves, like I can't believe it took them however many years to remove, or not even remove, just hinder that functionality. Like that.
I think they hindered
such
it
a
enough.
bad-
I think now what you've done is you've gone too far. I think this is an example of going too far by putting that upgrade in that you can extend D-scan.
And something else to take into to account, we talk about stacking defending bonuses. You talk about the D-scan changes. We talk about the new weather system for the EHP. Well, that's all also stacks on to the super that I'm going to bring to the field that now has double, triple EHP that it brings, like a Titan. And then a Titan has a Phenom bonus, right? So that's going to continue to stack on.
And then you add normal boosts that they probably got with them.
Yeah. So, and then the reversal of surgical strike. So I think, like, to me personally, from my background, number one, I don't remember hearing anywhere in the game from anybody, and somebody correct me, chat, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't remember hearing anywhere where anybody said, let's make Sov harder to defend or harder to attack. I want Sov. I don't feel like we get enough upgrades. Now, there must be somebody out there somewhere. I don't think CCP just, maybe they did. Forgive me if I'm wrong. If they did, there must have been some kind of desire to allow defenders and people who own Sov some flexibility to maybe, like, hey, let's create, better bonuses for having space. It's really expensive to have space, whatever it may be. But I really kind of scratch my head on this one, because some of the great stuff happens out there when you can go out there and we talked about in-capping stations. We talk about, in the past where you troll Sov and that kind of thing. And it's like, we're getting further away from it, where why not just make it just permanent space and, like, call it a day?
Well, they even made it
seems like it's a pain in the ass to attack it.
Well, they added in the skyhooks, which is kind of a cool. We can destroy them and shut off their Sov. But now they've made it where you don't want to do that, because then you have to put up all the skyhooks again when you take that Sov. You may as well just leave them and take the Sov without shooting the skyhooks. So there's no point shutting down their Sov upgrades as well. So
yeah, 100%. You mentioned, Ruts, as well, the structures, and I want to hear from this group. We talked about in our last talk with the low sec guys, not a lot of risk and reward. Like, there's not a lot of benefit to hitting structures low sec, and it just was like, whatever, right? What is this group's thoughts around structures and how they've attributed to not wanting to go and undock?
Well, it being like null group, you kind of have to. Like, if you're going to draw the direct comparison to either NPC null or NPC low, let's say someone forms up and you don't want to shoot them, or you don't want to fight, or there's too many, or I don't know, maybe you can't be bothered. It's fine. You're just in an NPC structure, so like you just dock up, and then that's that. No big deal. You just wait till they either thin out or they come with fewer people, and then you engage. But if you're based in null, you kind of have to, because whether you use that system as a home, whether you use that structure as a base, it has your flag, it has your team's pride. There was a story to putting that there in the first place, whether it was a massive battle for it that you tell all the people who've just joined your alliance, or maybe it was some kind of transfer because the people that used to live there maybe didn't want to be there anymore, or some kind of respect. There's a story behind every structure going down. There's no story behind the NPC structures. So from the player perspective, everything we have here is something we have either built or inherited from others. So if something comes to hit them, there's got to be some reason to defend it, right? Sometimes they just provide like a purchasing system. Maybe it's just eyes on a gate, because that's a gate that a lot of people die, so it's more effective to put a structure there so you stop dying. Maybe it's a keep star in a chain to try and help you get from one side to the other. But Yeah, I think structures are an interesting place at the moment, but at least you can defend with them. You know, if they've got modules attached to them, unlike NPC stations, you just have to keep on undocking. Oh, is it safe yet? No. Okay, dock back up.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, are they too?
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, are structures too hard to attack though? Like, is there too much? Again, we talked about defender advantage here. Are structures, especially when you start getting into Sov Null, I can't talk today. Especially when you start getting into Sov Null and you start factoring in all the other upgrades we just talked about, right? The additional weather effects and that kind of thing. Use structures that then, again, amplify that as well.
Hey man, they got rid of void bombs. Everything's good now.
Oh, wow. Okay. We're done here.
No, but seriously though, so, I mean, so I don't know how to answer this other than it's such a complex sandbox that there's so many factors to this, right? So even if something as simple as my Fortizar is shot, it comes out in 4 days. I want to be extra safe. I'm going to anchor another Fortizar
Mm-hmm.
in 24 hours, and it's anchored before the other one is shot. So stuff like
So it
that
doesn't
reduces
matter
the
anyway.
Exactly. So you have to have mechanical limits in the game. Hey, you're only allowed to have one Fortizar per system or something like that, right? And of course, that's going to get meta gamed and all that kind of shit. But there has to be hard limits that nudge players towards whatever behavior you're trying to implement. And I think that CCP has always taken the mindset of you need to have player driven this, players should create jump gates, players should, do all these different things. If they want to put 10 keep stars in one system, sure, knock yourself out, right? But I think at some point you have to ask yourself, is that the gameplay that we're really trying to create? And then work backwards from that and start taking and deconstructing a little bit. And so for the structures, yes, there was some positive movement with, taking away the initial timer or damage cap and stuff like that. But when they replaced POS and when they replaced the stations, they basically turned every Aster House into a station that you can dock in. You can do all these different things. When they first came out, they didn't even have counterplay. If you were an FC, you were perma-scrammed and perma-webbed for like 30 minutes because the web just never turned off, whatever, right? Not to mention the void bomb launcher, and they had it vulnerable for like 1 hour, 5 days a week, right? So when you have kind of those unforced errors being put in the game, it really makes you wonder, like, what is the gameplay design they're trying to create, and how do you actually adjust from that and work backwards?
It's there's a lot to that because a lot of the things you just mentioned, like the first thing I think of is I'm like, okay, in EVE Online, the average constellation 6 systems, you might be able to put, with all told, between flex structures and citadels, 100 structures. Let's say that because there's probably more in some 100 structures in a constellation. One, I don't want to grind it all. Two, some of the structures, which I think we were talking briefly before we got on, is skyhooks being what they were before were very engaging. Now, I don't even go and shoot the sky hooks. I'm currently taking people's sorry, Deepwater, and I'm reffing your hubs, and I'm just hitting the button to self-destruct all of them because it's just no point to reffing them and going through the effort. It's easier to just self-destruct, salvage them all, and walk away. Um, I don't have any effort right now to go shoot a fort as a mid-scale group if it's someone who's a little bit bigger than me. It's already an uphill battle. But then you're talking about, Garce just said it, is if I was in the position of P Horde, Frat, any of the larger groups, and I said, hey, they're shooting my fort, I'm going to drop 3 more, try and get me. Like at the end of the day, I'm going to have another fort down in the system. It doesn't matter. So like a hard limitation of something would be great to have. But I don't know what that looks like. There's a lot of nuance. And from a mid-scale group, it's really imposing.
You also have this, I mean, putting aside the fact that I can just anchor another Fortizar in less time than it takes you to do the armor on my Fortizar. Fortizars become better and better and better the less people you have on grid. So where you have us mid-scale people, we have maybe 70 tunes in fleet on a max CTA. Oh my god, my Fortizar just got refed. Like Station Fort's got refed. We have 70 people in fleet. You've got 25 in dreads and sort of a load of faxes and your mainline fleet. I can sit a Raven fleet with a couple of faxes on top of my Fortizar, and if there is a mid-scale group that's not much bigger than me, I just sit there and I dare you to drop dreads on me, because my Fortizar is going to kill all of your dreads. If you don't have 100, 150, 200 dreads, to basically out efficiency my Fortizar, you're fucked, right? Like your dreads, they're just all going to die to my Fortizar. It doesn't really matter whether you kill my minnow. I'm going to win the escort, and you're going to be massively demoralized unless you have limitless pockets.
Well,
Whilst my Raven
the
fleet
other piece is
blinks away at your fleet that's probably only got 10 to 15 Logi, and my Fortizar's got 3 ECM on it, which is 100% ECMing at least 3 of your Logi the entire time.
well, the other point about all this too, you field what 2-3 faxes maybe, and they field 100 dreads, and you have a fort that costs what 11 bill after you fit it, that kind of thing, and you kill 20-30 dreads because you just keep them bubbled and there's nowhere for them to go. What's the point of dropping the dreads in the fort period to clear the faxes when you know you're going to lose most of your dreads? It's not efficient at all.
Nope, exactly.
I mean, I like to bring some of those points together about the Fortizar's defenses, the kind of numbers of people you'd have on grid and the price point. Like when we set up in Curse with Decoy, we were very careful not to drop a fort straight away. Let's say we had a max ETA and we had X amount of people on grid, and we were prepared to fight the similar number of people because we know who lives around us. Fair enough. But you're never just fighting that number of people. Like if they want it dead, they want it dead. And so you're going to be fighting maybe 2-3 times the amount. And if you've committed, you've committed. So the M+1 thing is always a risk. But for the longest time, we put off having a stage in Fortizar. We just lived out of NPC stations and Astrohussars and Athenors because we didn't make a target for ourselves. We watched a group of people nearby us place Tataras and like even a Satio just because it was, the players want it and it's convenient. But actually, now you've got a couple of 30 build structures, ringing a bell that now the map is aware of it, they're going to come and fight it. So depending on how you live and depending on how you kind of convey that to your team, it creates a different target for your back.
And on the topic of structures, do we and this is just something that just came to my mind, that kind of thing. Like, what if we limited the number of assets you could have in a structure? Would that have any kind of impact to how they're used and that kind of thing?
No.
That would just make the game way more frustrating.
It would screw over
Yeah,
industrialists massively.
Yeah, no, please never do that.
I would bet there's a large portion of Fortizars that I think I can speak for the room. There's probably a large portion of Fortizars or Keepstars that are simply dropped for transit. So when you're talking about that use case, they're not keeping things there; they're transiting through there.
Yep.
A great example, PL just put up a Keepstar route through Great Wildlands because they don't want to take the regional through to EFM. Totally get it, but they have that option. They can drop 4 Keepstars, call it a day. Life's good. I don't think limiting assets does it. I think limiting Keepstars does it. One of the things I was going to mention is there's another guy here. Garce and I have played together for a long time. I've been around since 05. Garst, I think you beat me. I don't remember. But what I do know is I miss SBUs. I miss just dropping a couple SBUs in Sov and fighting every night. I really miss how the concept of dropping a station egg back in the days was a limiting factor, and geographical parts of EVE Online meant that alliances had to force project in a particular way. And because they couldn't just drop a keep star to hide their caps and tether up, there was inherent risk involved. You had to sit on a POS, and there was gameplay there, but there was also gameplay in every step of their transit to you in their progression. Honestly, that's what I miss about EVE at the moment. Every time someone says, "Hey, there's a new fort in range of me," I'm like, "Well, that's lame."
So let me jump
What
in
is an
there for a
SBU,
sec.
real quick?
Sovereignty
Real
blockade
quick.
unit.
I know what it is. I don't know if everybody in our chat knows what an SBU is. And real quick, can we have somebody tell us what an SBU did?
I'll hit it. So sovereignty blockade units were a small. I would say they were the original deployable. So you would deploy SBUs onto a percentage, 51% of gates in a system. So if you had a system that had 6 gates, you needed to do 4 gates. Once you did the 4 gates, everything else in the system became vulnerable for attack. So without even attacking the structures, you simply put the idea of threats. So it was an immediate, for me, what was great about them was I could drop 3. I'm no longer a threat, but they know I want to fight. If they don't come, I'm dropping the fourth, and now I'm escalating. So it made a really good escalation chain for Sov, and that's something I really miss. So you didn't have to fight on a structure initially all the time to get a fight out of it. It could just be, hey, let me drop some SBUs and see what they do.
I think
Oh,
there's
that's
a
awesome.
huge missed opportunity. I personally think the golden age, from what I remember for Eve, was like 2014, 2015, after
Agreed.
they cut the EHP on the Dominion Sov, so that they basically said explicitly, we don't want you to have to use super fleets to kill SBUs or whatever, right?
Yep.
But they had like a year or so before they introduced the new Entosis Sov, and I really think there's such a missed opportunity to kind of fuse the best of the systems. Have a DPS-based system that still benefits from ADM mechanics for player occupancy in space. It can be something as simple as shooting stargates, and the EHP is multiplied times the ADM. Like it's not a hard conceptual thing to come up with, but the advantage of that and the reason why those SBUs were nice, not those particular, but just the concept of them, is that it was putting capitals on grid, just like moon drills. Moon drills are a really positive change for the game, in my opinion, because similar to POS, they're putting capitals on grid to bash them, whereas citadels punish you for using capitals to hit them, basically. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there if they ever want to revisit Sov to kind of fuse those two systems together.
Yeah, because at the moment, Entosis is just irritating. Like, even
Yeah,
even
chat
when you're
agrees.
finished, you're still sat there going, okay, all my Entoses, red cycle, do you all out of cycle? Can we actually leave now? No, we got to wait another 10 minutes because you just started a cycle. All right.
Well, there's a disparity of effort between one person can, rat the ADM for the system or whatever, right? But it takes a fleet to destroy, and that's kind of the SPUs had the same problem, right? One rots with a blockade runner shitting out SPUs on a gate now forces you to form a fleet to go kill those things. Same thing with one guy in a blockade runner entering an Astra House or a POS, whatever, right? If it takes a fleet to kill, maybe it should take some kind of group activity to create. That could be a gameplay concept to consider.
I could see that being decent. I thought SBUs were balanced because there was no defender advantage given outside of whatever system bonuses were there by fact of having an SBU. But you are right that something that one person causes should not require group activity. It should be hand in hand. I like that idea. I agreed with you.
Unless the sovereignty blockade unit came back as a, if this exists, you don't get ratting upgrades, you don't get mining upgrades, you don't get weather storm effect. But you actually have to anchor it and then keep it online for a certain amount of time.
Ditto. With that, we've solved it,
Yeah,
team.
no,
Some sort of sovereignty jammer.
100%.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Catch you later.
Yeah.
And Dave, we have somebody from CCP watching, right?
Yes.
Yeah, CCP
B.
Which is it B? The
Yeah,
B.
he's
We've got the
just
B
on
in
his
chat.
other
He's
account.
watching. He's paying attention. So chat. So this is your opportunity
Don't be a
to
dick,
say
though.
something, add some input, because we're paying attention to the chat, and we obviously want to include that. So we've talked about a lot of problems, right? We've talked about different issues. Hey, we like with the step the direction Legion's going. There's obviously some issues. Not 100% sure what the direction with the additional Sov upgrades are. And we've touched on some solutions, right? We've talked about SBUs, adding mechanic. And we got Young Puke with us. Thanks,
Woo!
buddy. I'm glad you could join us. And we've talked about some started getting some solutions. What are some things that we feel like Legion doesn't address and are still some issues? And we've talked about SOV and SBUs. Is there anything else maybe we can do with structures, like maybe the SBU shuts off? That's what I used to like about in-capping structures, because you could go turn off their clone services and all that other stuff. Now you got to come out and shoot me because I'm in-capping your structures. Is there anything like that we would have a stomach for, or we'd like to see changed?
I'll say a more global thing. I'd like to address scalability and sprawl right now of SOV. I think just a caveat here. I agree that Metnoxes are a great change. I think because of Metnoxes and the nature of SOV, we've also said that the two groups that sprawl is good. And so larger groups are now sprawling a lot more, and it's limiting locations for smaller groups to get involved. And that is something I'd love to see CCP address. Is how do you address soft sprawl right now? What promotes using the current space you have and making systems more powerful, therefore more important, therefore worth doing, other than just setting up and reducing fuel costs for structures?
Somewhat from the chat I want to address real quick. Somebody said, don't mercenary dens cover the purpose of a sov blocker? Not entirely, because it takes time for them to work, and then they are really easy to get rid of. Like, in GSF, for instance, the amount of times I've gone and personally, just by myself, got rid of a merc den that's messing with sov. Like, it doesn't require any effort at all. You just shoot it with a dread and it's left. Or, for those that can't use dreads, get a Lashak, you know. Like. Or a new Marauder that does a lot of damage.
Yeah, I think to address dens, because I like the idea of dens, the same way I liked the idea of siphons on passes. I think it takes too long for the effects, the adverse effects of a den to actually happen. And so having them there, plus the fact that they're just about paper thin, means you don't get that effect that I think maybe was intended to happen, because like there is some validity to that. As isn't this supposed to be the use case of that? Sure, I can just clear them in a couple days. Like it's pretty easy, and I'm not feeling those effects.
So
yeah, and I was. Go ahead, Garth.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, is Mercs Dens almost like if that is an avenue, something that's already in the game for CCP, maybe a quick win to buff how Merc Dens negatively impact Sov. Like that's a thought there. Just want to hear opinions there.
I mean, at that point, if you're saying, because BJK mentioned it was actually kind of hot, if you do SBUs and they affect ratting, they affect something else. I mean, that's what they do. That was the intent, right? So, 6 in one hand, half a dozen in another. I like those ideas.
I just feel like the solutions we're proposing are too tactical. So when we're talking about stagnation of the game, we're talking about sprawl. These are emergent issues that come out of thousands of actions players are making on any given day, right? So buffing an SBU or buffing this isn't going to change that. So on one hand, you have how do I get more capitals on grid fighting? So maybe doing something like requiring a Titan to Entosis a keep star to repair it or shoot it. Now you have to have a Titan on grid for 30 minutes. Now you have a gameplay reason to use a Titan, and everything escalates around that. That's one piece. But I think what my grand theory for everything is, there's no ownership for any group really of like their locality, good or bad. And what I mean by that is if I live in NPC Venal, it's right now it's just floodplains for Frad. It's in their jump range, they own everything. That's what it is, right? If I am living in Venal and I'm living in NPC station with my small alliance and I want to take a Frat R64 or something like that, there's so many gameplay movement bypasses that incentivize them to sprawl as large as they can, that until you restrict that movement or reshape the geography, something I've been thinking about a lot and would really like to see would be if they physically move the ranges of the systems around, jump ranges especially, because that will change the incentives for what groups consider viable or not. So on that piece, you have, the behavior nudging towards how much you take, but then also you need to create competition through scarcity. Space is very static. Nullsec never changes. Almost everything. You can get a Haven in a -0/0 system. There's no real competition to actually saying I need to invade my neighbor and reset them or have drama or something, because why? Everything's the same. It's all homogenous.
And then also, why drop your caps? Your supers are worth more. There's no incentive. There's no 1-for-1 incentive to go for this system. It's not as important anymore.
Yeah, I believe Puke has a question.
Yeah, so I guess it's twofold. And like one is you're touching upon it already, Garst, which is like how do you minimize sprawl across nullsec, right? And so like if you guys had a magic wand and we gave you keys to the kingdom and said fix sprawling of null, how would you guys solve it?
That's very simple. I mean, it's when you look at the regional gates for where capital fleet movement can move, because that's what everyone's going to be planning off of, you have to adjust it in a way that it puts a limit on how much people think they can reasonably control with that super cap umbrella, with taking fleets back and forth every day, with whatever it is, right? But there's so many systems in place, from Ansiplex without fatigue to Zarzak to drifter wormholes to jump clones to normal wormholes. All these things let you move across the map instantly. And the downside of that too is that it means anybody in the world can pretty much third party you pretty regularly, which means that you don't have that ownership over your local fight. And because of that, you don't have stories where you say, hey, oh my God, we just came to Venal for the first time. I'm so excited. We just put down our first Fortizar. We captured our first Athenor. That's a more exciting story for player retention and player recruitment than the flip side of that, which is I'm a fraternity member, FC number 27 said show up, we shit on Try, I don't even know what this moon is, and we went back home, I got a pap link. No one's writing home to their friends or going to a game website and saying, oh my God, please come play Eve. We just had generic fleet number 37 of the day.
I just want to
Kind of,
highlight that too, that it doesn't just impact your gameplay, but it impacts the connection of your ability to grow your alliance, one, to foster those stories that people remember. And like that's what fundamentally what the game is all about, is that creating new bonds and memories for other players.
Yep.
it feels like it depends on what your drive is as an alliance, because it's at this point of the conversation I wish Nemex was here, because he lived for the longest time in NPC Venal with his team.
Mm-hmm.
Just every single day he'd see Fraternity go out and do something, and whether it was a 256 pilot Nightmare fleet, he'd still form, and as long as there was one Nightmare that didn't align, he was going to be there and kill it with 3 Hecates. And if you have that mindset of finding something for your team to do, and you want to, and if that was your driver, because oh wow, Frat just rocked up with this massive fleet and we managed to kill something valuable, that's really impressive and was really part of their story, and they really excelled at it. If you were moved into Venal with the idea of growing an alliance, that's not going to work. But if you moved into Venal with the idea of having 20-30 people that you want 100% PvP all of the time every day, you could absolutely get that. Whether it was one person camping a gate, or whether it was 30 people that wanted to block in somewhere, or maybe you moved a dread.
But they're not mutually exclusive. We did that in the past. Hundreds of alliances have done exactly that in the past, but I think the systems have existed so long that people forget that they were different before. They weren't always this way. This is choices CCP made has created this gameplay. So I'll get off my soapbox here, but I mean, you have to put mechanical limits in the game to nudge the player behavior towards what you want to accomplish, and then you can completely change everything. Look at jump fatigue. Before jump fatigue, there was a literal blue donut. People don't know where that expression came from. You had like NC Dot going from Delve to Cobalt Edge to defend
Mhm.
every random timer. That was the blue donut where that expression comes from.
Well,
Someone,
it's
sorry, just really quickly about Sprawl and Ansiblexes that I just want to add. Someone did come up with a very good idea. I can't remember who it was. If someone in Own Fleets mentioned it to me. Is turn Ansiblexes into a Zarzak style gate mechanic, where you can pick one and you can go backwards and forwards through that one jump bridge, but then you can't use another one for a set period of time. And then that stops Horde going from MJ all the way down to Scalding Pass in 5 jumps, whatever the hell it is at this point. And the opposite, goons coming all the way from UALX to.
I had ran on
we
the
could create.
premise of jump bridges should only be usable by the alliance that drops them, and they should own both sides.
I mean, I'm just gonna counter. We use one jump bridge and one jump bridge only to get to Wicked Creek from UALX. Just gonna throw that one out there.
Oh, well, okay. Let's get to Delve then. There you go.
We also
When
only
you go
use
Brave,
2 jump bridges
it's only
to
one.
get to
Okay,
Delve.
alright.
Because the jump bridges in Delve are not set up for us to go that way.
Sure, but that is
they
goons
could be.
and friends, yeah?
Yeah.
That is goons and friends. If you tell me that I can just shoot goons, that is a lot more favorable engagement for me.
But players will always find a way to game that system. I think people who go, so like for example, like the keep stars idea, where you're just like, oh, this alliance can only have 1 keep star. It's like players will just find a way to get around that.
Make a new alliance.
And it's the same with the jump bridges thing. It's like everyone will just move towards the safety of the biggest block. If you've got goons and they're the only ones who can use that jump bridge network, everyone's just going to form corps and join goons for the most part. Some people won't. Some people don't want to do that, but they'll join goons, they'll join horde, they'll join frat, they'll join init, and there won't be these kind of, there'll always be the smaller alliances, but there won't be your Sigmas or your Fanatics or your Pandemic Legion NCs anymore.
I don't really buy that logic, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I
because,
don't either.
Because we had that after Phoebe hit. Phoebe was the best patch in the game. I don't care what you think about jump fatigue. It used to be way worse. It changed the incentives for NC Dot to stop caring about Cobalt Edge, and it created space for small and medium alliances, anybody, to actually take Sov and do these things, right? And that's the atmosphere we need to create again. And it may require Columbus, may require lots of different changes or nudges, maybe adding fatigue back to Ansiplexes, whatever, right? But there has to be some way to stop the sprawl and give people a chance to actually do it. And the proof in point was the Southeast Agreement, which Tri took advantage of and enjoyed for a couple of years in Wicked Creek. And that was by choice. It was player-directed strategy. And then Goons wanted to move out of Dell, and so it ended. And now it's not a thing anymore. But it shows that this can exist if you're creating gameplay that incentivizes it.
And it existed, right, with player agreement, even without ANSIs not having fatigue, right? And so like but it should exist though without the necessity of blocks agreeing, allowing it to exist, right? Like that's the content that we should all sort of aspire for in Null to exist.
So
I mean, but that's
Right.
that's also that is the core bit of what my like CSM campaign was, is that you are looking at changes right now that probably need to actually happen in a diplomacy, ACL, or standings situation, and you're talking about ACLs on bridges, and together those two things might get you what has already been modeled by this C. It was the most fun I've had in this game since 2014, 2015, hands down. You have a model for it right now.
So Pando suggests remove ACLs from Ansiplexes and put a hard limit per alliance on them. He suggested in chat.
Yeah, I'm
Pando.
not the only one. There you go. Boom. There's another one.
Well, that does and I think I think it was Panda who said like they're afraid of. See, the game has always been a sandbox, so you're like, well, maybe we can balance things to or we don't need to put a hard limit on it. But I guess the problem is, and I think we all can agree with this with the EVE Online, is the players find a way to break everything. I don't think CCP, and the challenge CCP has is they go in and implement something and they're like, okay, well, we can't account for this X, Y, and Z person who theory crafted the heck out of this and found a way to break this system. So realistically, I think the right answer here is a hard limit on Ansiplexes, because it sounds like, from what I'm hearing from everybody here, is Ansiplexes are really kind of where the problem is when it comes to sprawl, because it allows that force projection so much easier in the game.
And that's just a symptom of, again, expanding as wide as is convenient to do. If it's no longer convenient, then you're not going to expand so far, and it opens up white space for everybody else. And I think that's part of it. But I really challenge CCP to think structurally about the game. And I know 20 years into it, there's not a lot of appetite for big changing things in the game. But, a year ago, I would have said there's too much space in the game, delete half the space. Now with the new soft system, people are saying there's not enough space in the game, because I need to provide for my mega alliance, and now I need an additional region. And I think that's actually more positive. And what I would really like to see is, something 20 years ago Star Wars Galaxies did was depleted resources, and moon minerals would move around. You had a prospect for them and things like that. You could do something similar with TrueSec. You can change the systems to basically create scarcity and change people's need to be blue around them. I mean, at what point does Goons want to reset TNT and take their space or something like that?
So
don't talk about scarcity, Garth. Go ahead.
One idea that I've been sort of pondering was, I know if you guys saw Civilization 7 trailer, but Wonders. Imagine if there's like Wonders, like a depleted resource that spawns in a space or something that gives you a mineral that costs 50% negligible dread cost, or building supers or something. Lasts for 6 months, right? Like sort of like these sort of limited, like an oil, but it's not as what's the word? Like it's not abundant.
Prolific?
It's finite resource. Would that encourage then more fighting, people deblooming each other, competing with each other, or will people just trade?
You've made an event at that point. So like we've done this before. So we had Technetium and Goons sitting on Technetium for years.
Exactly.
back when minerals were separated. Except no one really shot those moons except for like BFL, because goons would just blob the crap out of them. It didn't. I don't think that's the avenue that gets you what you want. I do think you make every individual system in EVE Online more important to people, and then you limit sprawl by adding hard mechanics. So as Garst is saying, maybe it's a distance from your chosen capital. Fuel costs start to go up. It disincentivizes going and dropping more things further away from your capital AU wise. Those are the kinds of things that I think don't affect every single player in a way that might be adverse to a rat or a PvP or anything else other than simply limiting sprawl. And by doing so, you have limited jump bridges where you might be dropping structures, that kind of thing, or at least dropping structures and having those iHub benefits that we were very worried about earlier in this conversation.
That idea is great until you get somewhere like Dronelands where it is so on top of each other that they could keep most of their own space that they've already got and not give a crap.
I can agree with you. I mean,
they need to space that out.
By that.
Yeah, it needs to, like, I like that they're adding new parts of space and all that. Like, I loved it when you could go across Eve in Zarzak. It made a lot more fighting going on. But they need to change it up. As it's been said on here before, the map has been the same for a very long time. And everybody's turtled in their own little place because why move? So if they changed the map up a bit, for instance, made it so there was some like galaxy drift that made regions go a bit further apart, sort of thing,
One thing that we've been actually chatting about was like it literally, I think it was what Garth was saying too, is like the space between systems expand. But there's a black hole and it spreads all the systems apart. So like your ability to, like, I know, for example, like MJ TAC, they hit like 200 plus systems with caps. Like instead of 200, it becomes 100, right? And it's just a massive player event that occurs, and so space is wider. And so then your ANSIs, you don't have fatigue, or you can if you want to, but then ANSIs that are not as effective, right? And so like this sort of expansion, quote unquote, of space,
283.
283 systems, right? Like
with standard captains
on Horde, but yeah, but like just any system, right? Even if you do 4H TAC, right, or whatever, like it would allow people to have more room to breathe. Fundamentally, is what you guys are saying.
Yeah. When I say
real quick,
go on, Keith.
Dave, just real quick, what I want to do is, just so the chat's tracking on this, why is sprawl cause stagnation, right? And just my thoughts real quick, and I want to bring this all together, is the sprawl of big blocks like, PanFam, the Imperium, the group that most of us are a part of, or at least me and Dave and some of our viewers, that kind of thing, they kind of suffocate the content. And the way CCP in the game is going to be more fun and grow and continue to grow is you've got to have a way for newer groups and younger blood and that kind of thing to come into the game, and sprawl kind of suffocates that out and kills the game. So that's why we're, just so everybody understands, where the focus on sprawl and try to limit that. Now anybody here can correct me if I'm on the wrong track here, but from my understanding, my experience in the game, that's what I've seen sprawl do, is it kills content.
So when I was in fraternity, we were trying to help build an EU and US time zone core that had a bit more like omni time zone presence. And one of the big things that was happening there is they decided to go up and fight B2 or B3, the people in Fade and Declan. Now, during that time, we used antiplexes a lot to get from A to B because we lived in the middle of Vale. We weren't really ready to deploy because it was fun, but it wasn't like the be all and end all of the coalition. So we would actively use those networks to get from one side to the other. But that made it very easy to move a large fleet, but it was usually just one large fleet. So after a while, people started to realize, well, these people using antiplexes to get here, we either start the fight earlier in the day at a time that's convenient for us, and we shut the network down, which is an incredible advantage. Now there's no damage cap on these structures, by the way. Let's not forget you can reinforce antiplexes in 60 seconds with enough Kikimoris through a drifter wormhole. But on top of that, there was only one time we would attend. So we'd have the one thing that our hostiles finally worked out is that if they spoke to each other, they could coordinate attacking in Declan, they could coordinate attacking in Venal, they could coordinate attacking Branch and Poshvin and the Forge all at the same time. So that some days would have to either split the force and maybe have 3 or 4 fleets going in different directions, which is now, 3 or 4 times the content we had before. Or we just say, look, you know what? This thing that we have because of the sprawl is no longer viable to us. Let's just let that one die. For example, the Poshman forts are, while we focus on something else instead. So I don't think the antiplexes existing and moving large fleet from A to B is the issue. I think it's that if your only objective is the other side of this antiplex for the next 20 minutes while we shoot a structure, then you're in a bad spot. If there's different targets to go for or different opportunities to take, there should absolutely be a plan B or a plan C or a plan D for that team or that team's time as well.
Yeah, especially if you've herfed your guys up and got them into fleets. One thing that drives me nuts is herfing for ages and then having to go, well, we're going to stand down because there's actually nothing to do.
Yeah, like it's just because like maybe they've got more numbers or maybe they've got a better comp or maybe they've flicked on a storm. That doesn't mean it's the end of your play session.
Yeah.
If you've told 50, 100, 250 people, hey guys, tomorrow we're going to do a thing at a time, don't pin all your bets on this one particular thing. Like we quite often in the early days when we were trying to really grow their EU time zone, we would form like 30, 40 people. We'd have 100 and 150 come and fight us. And of course, we're not going to win, right? You tell the team straight away, look, we're not going to do that anymore. Let's downship from TFIs and grab a Caracal and we'll do something else instead. And then you just dance around for a little bit. You get some content out of it. It's not the objective, but as an FC, you still found content for your team. They still had a good time. You still made the other 150 nerds that tried to blob you like sweat a little bit because you're doing something and they don't know what. There's a certain responsibility to make content available to our team that extends beyond hyper focusing on one grid or one moment in time. And I agree with some of the points of ANSIs. I'm not trying to like bash the idea of antiplexes being bad. I just think we haven't fully utilized the fact that they can be reinforced so easily now.
I mean, you could drop blops on them and be out before the defending group even realizes you're there, which is really good.
Yeah.
In and
I
out.
think
Yeah, exactly.
20-minute adventure.
Bringing in like the low spec perspective of the NCs is that the way that projection impacts us is that like fights where it would be like 100v100, like Satogus is a perfect example. We talked about this in our last chat where we had Init bring 250 jackdaws, a full frat fleet with 100 plus dreads, able to just basically move in, and it doesn't like even if we ref the ANSI in advance, we have to know that they're coming, right? But like we don't know that they're coming. They just flash form 200 people, take the ANSI. So that means every fight I have to then pre-ref all these ANSIs for the case that they may show up. I don't know.
That's so much effort.
It's a lot.
You're gonna have to do something, right?
Oh,
well,
come on.
that's
Come on,
exactly what
man.
needs to happen.
What you just described is exactly what I'm saying with like you don't have local ownership of a fight. If people are so bored, they shouldn't go across the map with a 250-man fleet to shit on somebody else's content.
But that's the whole point, right? Like the beauty of Eve is when we have so many of these low-cal fights happening, but when they reach 1,300, 1,800, 3,000, like the beauty is, and we have four of these 300-person fights happening all at the same time, not just everyone picking on the same content because they can't fight the person that's right next to them. Right, like that's the problem.
I think it's the definition of failure from a game design perspective. If you try and create content for your people and you lose so much control of it that some other group just makes it into their content and you have no say in the matter. Like you create a timer and then 200 goons and 200 pan fam fight over it and you're just kind of sitting there on the sidelines like, oh cool, why'd I even bother doing this? I think that's the definition of failure.
Yeah, but even in the last meeting that you had this last chat, people were talking about, oh, well, I was looking at my ping relay about what other people in the game were doing. It was so much effort to try and move aside and get involved. And it's like you're not kind of contribute to you just everything is a third party. You've got so many people that are willing to third party and put the effort in to turn up if they know they have more numbers, and not so many people that have the effort to make something that's of any value to their team.
They would if they think they're going to be successful with it. No one wants to be feudal in what they're doing. Like, the stories the players are creating for themselves can only happen if they think they're going to actually be able to do them.
And
I'm
if
not-
there's
Let's
value in
bring-
it.
let's bring these ideas together real quick, because I think there's some synergy here, and I think let's combine this for what Puke's talking about, what we see in LoSec. Why do null groups show up and want a third party on a LoSec fight? Because what we talked about earlier, attacking Sov and doing all the Sov stuff is annoying as crap. No one wants to do it. It's a lot easier to show up to a fight going in LoSec over some Fortizar where you have no skin in the game other than the ships that you're putting on field, and go shoot some things, and maybe you come out and you kill some caps or whatever, because the defenders, like the LoSec guys, the guys who own the structure, to Garth's point, the people who live there, they're having to put more stuff on there because it means something to them. But then another 300 people show up using the Ansiblexons and other mechanics because their content is dead. There is no content. Like, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the big groups, that kind of thing. There's a lot of rumors and stuff going around that people are going to do something, but they don't. And then with the addition of this Sov null defense stuff, and we talked about it here in this group where we feel like, oh, it's just really hard to attack null. What is the incentive for blocks to go and shoot each other and have their own local fights we were talking about? And then just when they can just be over in LoSec, they can be over in another part of the space where somebody else is fighting in third party with not a lot of effort, right?
So I think where we are at the moment with Phoenix Coalition is an interesting spot, because 5 hours ago we had one alliance trying to shoot an Ansiblix. We formed to shoot that, and then a second alliance shows up on the same grid. So we're fighting Insidious, and then we engage them, and then Siberian Squad shows up. Then we engage them. Then Fraternity shows up, and then we engage them, and then Snuffed Out are in a different system trying to bump a Titan off grid. So for 2 hours, we're kind of like brawling in one system because people constantly escalate against us. And then we go home, and then right now we've got 150 initiative Ferox fleet in B9 that I'm sat watching. Phoenix Co's also formed 150 Harpies to kind of deal with that. And now there's 150 Goon Swarm kicking up. Like, I'm not even joking. If I could stream B9 right now, there is so much happening. We've had every major alliance except for Horde come and visit our staging system today with a fleet of over 100 people. So we're not bored for content. I don't know.
I mean, all the groups you just named lived one region apart from your space. That simply says that you want close regional conflict, other than maybe Goons and P Horde there.
Yeah,
But you're talking Init, Sip Squad, they're all within a region of you.
Goons is the only one that's a pain in
the
the ass to get there, but with a Kiki fleet, Drifter Wormhole, Zunk, off you go.
Yeah.
So what's hilarious is,
Fun.
I always laugh when I hear the word content, right? That's just become part of the lexicon. Like an accountant would call fun content. Like I've always thought, like, when did we lose the fact that this is supposed to be fun? It's not just content. Doing an NPSI fleet is not the same thing as taking meaningful ownership of an invasion and having a grudge match against Bob and like trying to blackhand them and kick them out of Delve and all this kind of stuff, right? Like the legendary history of Eve is made from stories that people are creating because they care. And the problem is none of these systems as they design right now get anybody to care to do more than the minimum.
That's the big thing. Why would we attack someone? The last war I took part in where I actually gave a flying fuck was the war where everybody attacked Delph, because I needed to give a crap. But, we've glassed regions since then. It's been like, oh, that's nice, we've blown this up, okay. Yeah, there was the little bit where Horde took catch and all that. That was fun. But there's no reason to go, you know what, I really want to do this. I really want to go and kick their ass.
What makes you care, though? So what drives
the
what
need?
makes us care more?
The need to actually do it. Like, for instance, the attack on Delve, I needed to care, else we were fucked. The other side cared because the other side cared because they wanted to destroy Goons because Goons.
I think you should actually ask the question of what's making people stop shooting them while they go in glass regions. Right now it's I need to tie-dye reinforce, or I need to hit up CCP and say, hey, I need a node reinforce so I can go shoot their super caps. Well, that sounds like a whole day commitment. Fuck, I have a job. Excuse my French. It's like, well, I'm not going to shoot Goons, super caps, or glass in this whole region. I don't care. Also, the systems aren't that valuable to me. I think those are that right there is, for me, if I was in your position, I'd be just as bored. I'd also wouldn't do anything.
It's like
That's a great point too. Like, just one quick thought on that. Just for things like ADM and toasting, you 6.0 ADM and toastus, if it's contested, can take 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. Most people don't, especially with Eve's player-based aging, doesn't have time for that in a day.
Not to mention the payoff is so low.
Yeah.
I wish there was a way, and like this is just me talking out loud, like if there was multiple avenues of not just in toasting to take someone soft, but there was multiple avenues of attack. Like make it more like a chess game versus like you have to hammer in on an iHub, hammer in on a TCU. Like if there was more, like there's dynamic systems. Let's say, yes, you can attack an iHub or a TCU, but make it, I'm not saying this is what it should be, I'm just saying as an example, make plexes. Make it so there's a small group that wants to stage a couple one, and they have to just plex, and it slowly trickles down their ADMs or something, right? Like, or if it's some other systems that like it just gives the attackers multiple ways to attack a soft.
We're going on an ad break real quick, so we're going to lose some folks if you're not subbed. If you're subbed, you get to sit here and listen to us continue to talk. Just want to let you know we'll lose some of our viewers who are not subbed. So
sounds like they need to sub.
Now we're talking. I think we're touching on an interesting point now that we're focusing on the fleets that happen in that fleet window, whereas actually PvP can happen 24/7. If you want to lower someone's ADMs, you stop them from ratting, you stop them from mining. You either cloaky camp it or you kind of keep a little patrol in that area as well. I think there's still a lot of the EVE player base that has time for it, that can still go out and maybe just harass things with stilettos or the odd person going through and killing the Ishtar and all that roaming kind of content. But if you want to take Sov, it's got to be more than a 1 hour fleet or more than a 3 hour fleet. It has to be, you've got to move in with the intent of being there. And before you do that, you've got to live nearby. So it's convenient to attack.
Not to mention the hours of planning prior to you actually doing the op. Getting everything in position, all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That and we haven't even touched on the grouping of FCs into the larger blocks nowadays. You have a distinct lack of content creators who give a damn about it. If you can make it easy for a content creator to exist, sorry, I'm using your word that you don't like, Garst, then you're going to see smaller groups. A lot of us are centered around, like, I run my group. They don't form unless I form. Been trying to change that. Thank you, Out of the Blue. Change yourself. Get better. There's a lot of groups like that, though. BJK with Decoy, Garst. I've known Garst and Try for years. Like it's the same groups of people who just have been stubborn. It's not exactly easy. I'd love to see the Securitazes and the other peoples go around and do individual alliances again, but it's just not worth it.
Something we talk about, and I asked why do we, what makes us care, right? What makes us care? Why do we do all the planning that we do before fleets and ops? Because we care, right? We care because of what? We don't want to lose all of our stuff. The reason why I think that people don't care about losing their space because they don't lose anything. What do you lose? You lose, okay, sure, you lose some structures, you lose some iHubs, but those are for a larger group or whatever, I would say a larger mid-sized group that might get glassed by a goons or a horde or something like that. That can be replaced. Correct me if I'm wrong here, anybody. Fairly easy, but you have like I've watched so many groups evac from a structure. I know there was a big structure in a horde staging structure that they one of their SIGs based out of Dave. We had like 3,000 goons show up to. There was nothing that stopped them from just moving all their stuff out.
Yeah.
Of course they didn't fight over it.
Because
I'm actually okay with them moving their things out. What I'm not okay with is that they're moving their things out into a fort in the same system that they just dropped, or 3 jumps away into a keep star or something that they had set up. I'm not at threat of losing my Sov every day, probably because it's not worth it at the moment. But the reason I form and I go through the prep is I like to shoot stuff. Like I'm out every single night doing PvP and EVE Online, and I've been doing that for however long. It's just that it's still gripping in that sense, but now it takes a lot more work. It's not always about Sov for an null-sec entity. I'll go to low sec and enjoy faction warfare right now. It's quite entertaining, but there's no reason to do anything outside of that.
Yeah, on a comment in chat, saying they think it's rather FCs don't want to let their fleet down or make them feel like they wasted time. It's more the wasted time, I think. There's a lot of objectives where I like my time is not what it used to be, so I generally FC the ones that I know will be entertaining, or I'm just bored one day. But there's a lot of times where I look at it, and especially soft contests lately, I'm like, it's not really worth my time, and I know it's not worth the fleet members' time, but you gotta have the fleet there in case, and that's one of the big things.
Sorry, just to add on that, for me, it's not about is the objective important, is the timer I've made content enough. It's the people that I'm flying with. Like, if you want to get into nullsec, it's a commitment. If you go AFK for a week or a month or a year, you will not come back to the same space that you had before. You'll get pushed out unless you grow into a size that you're stable to just live in one area. It very much is on the whole team to be there. And the reason why we stick in Null, or we stick together as a corp, or we stick together as an alliance, is because we enjoy flying with each other. And, it got to a point, like, I'd sometimes see more people from corp at the pub than I would in game, right? Just because that's the way kind of like it turns. But ultimately, I'm not logging in every day because I want to PvP. I'm logging in every day because I want to fly with the team. And whether the timer is important doesn't matter. You've asked people to be there, and you've made that commitment to their time to do something with it. So whether you go out and you win a massive fight against the odds, or you pick a parallel objective and you do something else in its place.
It's so true. Like when we were fighting each other, BJK, when I was in B3 or B2 or whatever we wanted to call it at the time, I was not the FC you asked to form up for a set piece timer. I was not that guy because I knew they were going to be blue balls. I said, don't do that to the people. I would always form up something else. I'd do something afterwards. I was always trying to provide something because, like, most people who get blue balled either don't log in for very long, or the people who are trying to generate some fun for them also don't log in. And then at that point, everyone is just playing Albion,
I do remember several times back when we were fighting up in Pure Blind, defending B whatever the hell number it was then. The amount of times that somebody on Discord would be like, okay, let's stand down, they got more than us, and me and Darkshines would turn around and go, well, no, because you've dragged all of us all the way up here. We are going to fight, we're going to kill some shit, and then we're going to leave. Because we're not dragging our members all the way up here. Well, that's the big thing. If you ask allies to form and you drag them the other side of the galaxy, from, say, Dalve or Fountain all the way up to Pure Blind, there's going to be a fight. Like, we're not going to sit on a fort and go, you know what, they've got 100 more people than us. Why don't we just tiddle our ass back to Dalve? No. Nah. We're going to go in and we're going to shoot someone.
Right?
Like,
but I think
I'm going to... real quick, I want to address something that somebody said in chat, and I didn't get to read the entire thing. But somebody said it's not easy to get into FC. And I'm going to circle everything back here in a second. And I want to address this because it's something I take to heart as I've been playing the game. Is that there's a lot of stuff you need to set up and that kind of thing and all this other stuff. I will tell you that I've been playing EVE Online since probably 2012-ish time frame with one account. And I have FC'd some really cool content. I've done some really cool things with one account. You just need to go out there. And part of it's finding the right group. You just need to go out there, not be afraid, and take some dudes out and go shoot some stuff. Yes, there's a lot of planning for big stuff. Don't get too caught up in that. I encourage you to go out there, take your friends out, go shoot some things, and create some content on your own. That's how the best stuff happens, and you'll start to get into it.
This is something I say to people a lot. A lot of people see FCing as what all the big names that you know, or all of us talking on here do. That's a small part of it. That's the part where we have to do this or stuff dies. We all do the fun stuff as well occasionally. The way you get into FCing is, as Keith said, and the way I did it, for instance, back with Fuzzy Claws, is you get in a fleet, you ping for a bunch of dudes to come join you, go out and kill ratters or something. You don't need to get eyes here, you don't need to get scouts here, you don't need to have some big content plan. Go out and kill stuff. That's where you are when you start. The stuff that we're talking about is where you get to after you've killed some stuff, and then you go, you know what, I feel like taking out I don't know. Off the top of my head, Ferox is just because, top of my head. And then that's where you start evolving into doing other stuff.
It's not just that, right? Like we talked about this in the other podcast where it's like you have to be in a group that allows that growth and room. There's a lot of old guard that I'm going to say pearl clutching. That's not the right phrase, but they say I need to run this fleet. You got to let the new boys in town make mistakes. Learn from their mistakes. Sit with them, mentor them, teach them, put them in environments where they are going to fail, and let them fail because like that's fine. You lose a fleet, who gives a fuck, right? Whatever. And you teach them afterwards. You mentor them to the next generation of players. I mean, you guys said it perfectly. Garst has been playing since forever. We've all been playing basically forever. Where's the new guys? Where's the new blood? Where are they coming from? And one of the best areas right now to really learn in like sort of like a rule set setting, not to show my space, but to faction warfare. But I'm gonna say it, faction warfare.
He said it.
He said it.
No, but I'm saying it's like those type of sites. Whether it's incursions, which Wally Mart's famously that's where he started, right? And so like not to bring him up, but as an example, right? Like you can learn these sort of rule sets, and it's the same shit. It's just a different scenario. And like learning battlefields, learning incursions, learning these things, and just taking out and being willing to fight and record your fights. And it's a skill. And once you learn the skill, you'll be one of the big boys eventually in a year or two. That's all what it is.
Yeah, a good example for this is when the last war in Delve happened, World War B or whatever the hell you want to call it. Goons had hardly any of the big name FCs left because they had all burnt out and won Eve. They eventually came back. People like V and John and all that reappeared, but they weren't about. Even Asher for a bit of it was burnt out of the game. So it took the new guys stepping up and some of the older people like Asher mentoring them to get in there, and that's what it needs. A lot of the older guys to step back and just let the newer guys fall over themselves occasionally, as long as they're learning from it. It's all right losing and losing a fleet as long as you learn from it. If you don't learn from it, there was no point doing it in the first place.
Yeah, and I want to take us back to, and I think it's important we spend a minute to talk about that because it is something close, and I think getting new people to do it, I'm really passionate about it. Reach out to me in game, Keystone and Shalom. I'll gladly talk to you and help you say, hey, here's some of the things that I used to do, that kind of thing, and to help create content for smaller groups is kind of where my background was before I eventually went to Goons and the Imperium. So, but I do want to take us back to kind of the problem solution piece. We think that Legion is a step in the right direction. There are some problems with Legion. Super buffs maybe be one of them. I think some of the Null guys, the big blocks, would maybe disagree as well. But from a mid-sized group, it's like, that kind of stuff. The reversal of surgical strike, great idea. The Logi balance, I think, is a good idea overall. I don't think anybody has any issues with the Logi stuff. However, there's still some issues that have gone unaddressed. The Sov defense stuff with the weather systems and the upgrades there, I think has been is negative reception. I wouldn't say everybody here thinks it's a great idea. There's probably some guys in Null in the bigger blocks who think, yeah, this is great. I can defend my Sov easier. Overall, I think it does limit content. It does hurt content. And then we talked about structures. Like, hey, structures kind of suck, right? If somebody said disagrees with me with structures being a great thing, let me know. Feel free to speak up. But overall, be like, hey, that's kind of a problem that needs to be addressed. Is there anything else that we missed that we feel like, hey, CCP isn't addressing in the Legion update? CCP hasn't made any comments on or anything that we've gone. We talked about Sprawl. I think Sprawl wasn't addressed in the Legion update. Is there anything else that maybe we missed as I'm going to use Garth's words here, I like to use it too, tactical versus strategic, from a strategic level to help, like, get rid of stagnation? As kind of final thoughts here. Is there anything else we missed?
I mean, speaking for myself as an FC and kind of been on this roller coaster the past couple of years as a smaller group, the force projection is everything. We've constantly every 3 to 6 months had to sit there and be like, oh, this kind of didn't work out. What are we going to do next? And it's always a painful process to stare at the map and say, hey, we're going to go do this. Oh, well, we won't get soft there because they're too big. Oh, we're going to go there, but Snuffed Out's going to drop us, whatever, right? Like, there's no ability to go and just get a little bit of something somewhere, and I think that's even somewhat true in Lowsec too. I'm flying around Lowsec, and everything is either owned by Big Ab, Shadow Rectal, Snuff, or one of the blocks, right? So Moondrolls are great, but if you're taking a T3 Blops and you're jumping 2 or 3 regions away, or a Carrier Conduit, or whatever, force projection is a thing. And every time they make the player's life easier for individual players, they make it harder for groups.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree 100% with you, Garst. One of my pipe dreams one day is to run my own group and grow something else. But it's like when that prospect, and I've looked at that prospect and I've tried to do it in the past before, it just, to your point, like, where would you go to start? Where would a new group go? And I know Puke said, low sec, and that might be, but it's like, hey, I want to own Sov. I want to, be this megalomaniac and have this huge, group or whatever. I don't know where someone would start to do that right now. And I don't think the mechanics incentivize that or anybody to go in with those kind of dreams. So
I mean,
anybody else on the other thoughts?
even in the short term, over the last 3 to 4 months, I did try to poke a lot harder than I think most groups my size would at the moment. And I did that with Boss and Slow, and we started poking in the southeast, and we were immediately met by the same old projection issues. It's still Horde. It's still a floodplain for Goons and Horde now. Neither are actually fighting each other to a large degree over something like a set piece fight, like a structure. It's few and far between. The distraction of them shooting each other would be great. Like there is something good about two large groups fighting each other, but it's not worth it. I think I empathize a lot with Garst. I had a look at the map literally 2 nights ago. I was like, where do we go? What do I want to go shoot? I also even said, hey, I'm going to take a friend's birthday fleet out to the other side of Eve right now, just to have something fresh, something new, because it's not as dynamic as it was before. And so if you're asking what are things that I think are not addressed, it is the projection, but it is the individual balance to how a mid scale group or a small scale group can coexist while the large scale group exists. Like at the end of the day, it's not. I don't want to see the large scale groups disappear either. I think it's a threat. I think it's a risk. I think it's a promotion for smaller groups to join together to do something fun. I don't want to see those groups go, but I also don't want to see other groups and their growth stifled because of that.
And CCP has the power to make these changes. Like it's a message of hope. Like these are things that are not intractable. They're the result of changes that have been made over the past 10 years, and different choices would make different outcomes. Like these are things that can be addressed.
Yep. I 100% agree with projection being the trend here. Go ahead, BJK.
Also, I want to add some kind of additional points that we haven't touched on yet, which has really been grinding me down as running an alliance, is the fact that Sov, you cannot do as much with it as you used to. So let's talk about military and industry upgrades. So back in the day, you could slap a bunch of upgrades in a system, and as long as the ADM was high enough, you had them. So let's say 7 asteroid belts and 35 anoms per system. Now you've got to pick and choose which system you want to rat in, which system you want to mine in, and then even if you find a balance where, oh, hey, we've got 2 systems, I can finally rat and mine. Well, the basic materials you get in, you can't really do a lot with. If you ever wanted to build dreads, you now have to either have connections in wormholes who can supply them for you, connections in high sec who can get the R4 ore reliably, you've got to be close to Jita so you can haul it over, or you just wait for somebody else to do it and then maybe they export it as well. So, like, even if you have a constellation or 2 constellations, like, the only reason to try and fight for something else right now is because you might have a couple of havens, and nobody is taking Sov for another haven. That's absolutely not a driver. So when it comes to these, like when it comes to base upgrades, we've got a lot less we can do in Sov North once we finally have those systems. That I don't think is in a healthy place yet. Now it's exciting that we can now have a few more scanning sites. That's at least nice. But is that going to change much? I don't know. Maybe there's an interesting loot table in there. But in Null, we're so reliant on other places in the map at the same time as well. Like we need to be close to low. We need
somebody said you can't build tall anymore. You have to build wide, and I would agree with that. Where
Yeah,
that
that's bang
seems to
on.
be why the sprawl happens. Why do the blocks feel the need they have to spread out and project? Because to what your point is they have to build wide. They can't build tall.
Well, look at
Alistar,
Goons.
did you have anything for us?
I mean, I was just going to talk about the sprawl and say that sprawl isn't an issue as long as it gets exponentially harder the further you sprawl to defend. And to get to. But no, I think we've kind of raised most of the points. I mean, I think the weathers, as I said at the start, is just a really, really bad implementation. And if that comes in, will make stagnation so much worse than it already is, especially for us mid-scale groups. It will stop any attacker in its tracks in terms if you've got a 70v70. If you attack my fort, if I attack someone else's fort, I'm instantly nerfed. And it's just a bad idea. But otherwise, I think Legion is not awful in its implementation, and it is a step in the
Not
right
awful.
direction. Not awful is
Heck
the word
yeah.
I'll use.
CCP, there you go. If you're listening, they're not awful. Upgrade there from Alistar from Only Fleets. All right. Did anybody else have any other closing thoughts?
Nope.
I want to thank this panel for coming together today and spending. We've been on here for about an hour and a half, going on an hour and 45 here shortly. So definitely a lot of stuff, and I feel like we could probably spend another hour chatting about this stuff. So thank you for the panel for joining us today in chat. Really appreciate the input from the chat. I know we've had some really great points that were called out in the chat. There might be a part 2 coming. There might be a part 2 coming here soon. We'd like to see, how this shakes out. How does CCP take some of this feedback? I know they have other feedback mechanisms. I'm sure there's surveys we get asked to take as players in the game. And coming from a big organization myself, that feedback is important, and you get that feedback and help drive those projects and drive that change. So as players and as the viewers who are listening, be sure, don't be shy about your feedback. You see that email, fill out that survey, and you might be surprised what you get. Somebody from CCP listening to that. Dave, do you want to take us out, sir?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say on part 2 would happily do a part 2, and it'd be nice if some other nullsec groups that were invited would reply to messages occasionally. Maybe be the headline act of the show. So yeah, if anybody has a FC they would like, or Alliance leadership person they would like to get on a show and discuss these sorts of things, they can contact me or Keith. And yeah, maybe they could be the headline act. But until next week,
I got a few for you.
You got it. What?
I've got a few for you.
Okay. I send them my way. Send them Dave's way. We'll get them on.
And yeah, after all that, thank you for coming, guys, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.